Hello my fellow FNAF fans. So, as you can see, the video today is one that is, once again, trying to affirm my very valid thoughts of the most unexpected twist in all of FNAF history, that being that Circus Baby, aka Elizabeth Afton, will be our next villain in the FNAF universe. Now, I know a lot of you are wondering, how the heck is this guy going to make a part 3? Is there seriously enough evidence? Well, the answer is yes, with a capital Y. So many people have glossed over many details in the FNAF series that clearly point to Elizabeth Afton being the next villain, as many of us were caught up in theories like, is Gregory a robot versus a human, or is Glamrock Freddy Michael, which really these theories don't have that much influence on the actual story of the series. What does, however, is looking into the future of the games. What we haven't been looking at is how the series is going to progress once we defeat the Afton amalgamation at the end of FNAF Ruin, which is literally in a matter of days. Nobody, at least to my knowledge, is talking about those kinds of things. So that is what this video is about. My part 3 of Circus Baby Villainy deep dive will consist of looking into the future of the games, a lot of analysis from the books, and other details that have been revealed since my part 2. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let's get right into it. Now before we go into the meat of this video, I have to scratch the surface and cover a few little tidbits of evidence that I had not mentioned in my previous videos, as well as throw out some of the random garbage I spat out and for some reason decided to edit. First thing to mention is that Victoria from Help Wanted in Tales from the Pizzaplex is not Eleanor. I used to think that it was, considering she was using an illusion disc, had a nice slim body, and had 2 robot children, just like how Baby had 2 Bitty Babs at her side. But looking deeper, this is frankly untrue. Since we know that the Mimic 2 project was designed by Fazbear Entertainment, it's clear that Fazbear Entertainment specifically used a killer animatronic to intentionally murder Steve, rather than Eleanor just murdering him herself. It's clear that the illusion disc was meant to give him exactly what it sounded like, an illusion of his life around him. It gave him severe memory loss, so we would believe that he had a life with Victoria and her 2 children, specifically for Fazbear Entertainment to use Steve to make the games, only to murder him. Clearly, if Victoria was Eleanor, that means that random Fazbear Entertainment employees are totally chill with allowing Eleanor to just randomly go around killing people for the company. However, even though Victoria may not be Eleanor, I can guarantee you it leads into a bigger Circus Baby Villainy plot point. As MadPack continuously pointed out in his video, the CEO is the most important thing that we need to solve at this point in the lore, and the only 2 candidates were Elizabeth and Mrs. Afton. And as many of you know, Mrs. Afton being the CEO is the stupidest crackpot theory MadPack has made in a long while, with the exception of the Golden Freddy never existed theory. Go check out my video debunking why it clearly isn't Mrs. Afton in the right corner. So that leaves one character to be the CEO, which is Elizabeth and her new body for her to rule over Fazbear Entertainment. More on that later. Going back to Steve, if the CEO, with its very obvious evil intentions, are forcing Steve to make games and then murdering him so the credit is buried, that is very obviously an evil intention, and there is no character in the series to have that kind of intention other than Elizabeth herself, who is clearly trying to make her father proud. Second thing to obviously throw out is that Eleanor is not Patient 46. My part 2 video was made before the Bobby Dots conclusion came out, so GGY had not existed by the time that that video had come out. However, as we clearly know now, GGY, Gregory, is indeed Patient 46, as much as I hate to say it. Now while I hate that this is the case, it actually helps my Elizabeth is the CEO theory. Looking at tape 3 of Vanessa, after the first therapist is murdered, we get a new therapist that has been reading Vanessa's file. Now clearly, this therapist knows nothing about Vanessa at all, and her only information about her is Vanessa's file. Now what's super interesting about this file is that it's directly linked to Fazbear Entertainment, as this therapist mentions in tape 5 that her communications on work hours are about non-related work stuff. This means that the file is being updated by Fazbear Entertainment about Vanessa's actions, and it gives the therapist something to talk to as Vanessa comes in for a session. Now why is this important? Well, it clearly shows that Vanessa's backstory goes way back to the 80s, where Vanessa's father's name is Bill, and her parents' custody case for Elizabeth went on, in which William won and was able to keep Elizabeth. And, as I continue saying, the static is covering up how Mrs. Afton died after the custody case, meaning that the custody case is before 1983. Clearly, Vanessa is taking on the backstory of Elizabeth Afton. This means that if the file is being updated by Fazbear Entertainment, then there is only one person to have any intention to change things in her file to match Elizabeth Afton, that being Elizabeth herself. And if she is the CEO, she would directly change Vanessa's files to match hers, since the CEO knows that Vanessa has a strong case of the glitch trap virus. I mean, Vanessa literally tested the VR game as completely possessed by the AI replication of William Afton. Now the real question is, how does this line up with Elizabeth's intentions? Well, it's really simple. Elizabeth's sole purpose from here on out is to make her father proud. And who was it that cleared the path and found William's corpse in the FNAF 6 location and merged it with the Mimic to give Burntrap life? That's right, Vanessa. Elizabeth is intentionally trying to bring her father back through Vanessa, and clearly it has worked. And because Vanessa has the glitch trap virus, she is willing to go along with this charade of complete mind manipulation in freeing Afton from underneath the building. Next thing to mention is that the last 10 minutes of my Circus Baby Villainy Part 2 video was absolute garbage. Not only did I have my crackpot theory of glitch trap being Elizabeth, something that is a load of bullshit, but also many of my connections in the post-it room was clearly a stretch to connecting it back to Elizabeth. But here's the thing, the post-its themselves can all be a connection back to Elizabeth. If we now know that the fire did not work, there are only two possible Aftons that are still alive at this point, Michael and Elizabeth. Michael's nature throughout the whole series is that he wants to remedy everything that his father did, rather than bring everything back again. But Elizabeth is the complete opposite. She wants to bring her father back and make him proud. Now we see the post-its right here, and it's clear which characters are being represented here. The entire Afton family. Literally every single one works here, and they all connect back to each Afton. I won't go over too many of these, but I'll give some of the most infamous examples. The candy, pizza, cotton candy, cake, and ice cream all connect back to Bite Victim's party, as well as the ice cream connecting back to Elizabeth's death. There are 4 different images with 3 kids, as well as 1 image with 4, aka every single Afton without the mother. There's a drawing of the mother, a Fredbear plushie, the colors red, blue, yellow, and green to represent both the balloons at the Bite Victim's party, as well as the lights in the control room, a house with the word family over it, a house that looks suspiciously like the FNAF 4 house, and finally a note that literally says, "You are Afton family." Now, who drew all of these sticky notes? Vanessa did, clearly possessed by the glitch trap virus. The whole point is that this room is an embodiment of sticky notes for every single member of the Afton family. And better yet, Vanny is in the sewers, attacking you right before you go into that room. And all of this connects back to how Elizabeth is trying to bring the family back through Vanessa by making her father proud. Also, last thing to mention is that in my part 2 of my previous video, I concluded certain things about Frailty and Glitch Trap's existence, something that I will definitely go over in detail later in this video. Anyways, I think that covers up all the stuff to mention about the last 2 videos, so now we can move on to little tidbits of evidence that I forgot to mention in my past 2 videos. The first scene is Elizabeth. Now, as I constantly said in the last video, the only way for Elizabeth to come back is that she must know what is going on with Henry's plan, as it also feeds in with her line when she gets salvaged.
You don't really know who your employer is, do you?
Now, many people have said that Elizabeth don't know who the employer is either, but clearly she does. How do we know this? Due to this scene. At the beginning, when the cassette tape is playing, she literally pauses the cassette and says 2, 1, meaning that she knows exactly what is going on, i.e. being salvaged and trapped in the restaurant. However, as we know, the previous employer did not read paragraph 4 and did not trap all the animatronics, giving Michael the ability to make his own franchise and trap the 4 scrap animatronics. And as we know, once this happens, Elizabeth makes her speech that everyone forgets about. What does this show? It shows that Elizabeth knew everything that was going to happen to her. When she said you don't really know who your employer is, she wasn't misled. She actually did know because of the scene, meaning she had to snatch an exit plan. And as we see, she did, with her hand outside of the furnace area. To me, this is borderline proof. The second thing is this. If Michael was injected with Remnant, which he clearly was, we can also assume that Elizabeth was injected with Remnant as well, basically an Afton family ritual or whatever. Now, why is this important? Well, we clearly know that Remnant can regenerate any part of the body, so that's how Remnant gives you immortality. Now keep this in mind. Michael was injected with Remnant, and when he spat out Ennard, he died. However, he immediately got back up right after Baby said you won't die. Now there are 2 questions here. Number 1, how did he survive? And number 2, how does Baby know that Michael wouldn't die? Well, we know that Michael survived because he was injected with Remnant, and if Remnant can regenerate any part of the body, that means that if it regenerated all of Michael's organs after he puked out Ennard, then he would stay alive. And why does Baby say you won't die? That's because she knows that he won't die, because she knows that Remnant will regenerate Michael's body. This pops up the real question. How does Baby know? Well, it's pretty clear. If Elizabeth was injected with Remnant, then when Baby clawed her, when Elizabeth was trapped in Baby's stomach area, her body regenerated. And not just her body, her head. Why do I say that Elizabeth was decapitated? Take a listen to what she says in her story of Night 3 in Sister Location.
A little girl, standing by herself. I was no longer myself, and I stopped singing. My stomach opened, and there was ice cream. I couldn't move, at least, not until she stepped closer. There was screaming for a moment, but only for a moment.
Elizabeth screamed, but it stopped. Why? Well, because she was decapitated, and if we know that the mechanics of the Funtime animatronics, as we see in Count the Ways, we know that Millie was also decapitated, meaning that the Funtime animatronics mechanics easily have the ability to decapitate its victims. So if Remnant regenerates any part of the body, that means that Elizabeth literally had her head decapitated and it regenerated inside of Baby's stomach hatch. Therefore, she knew that Michael wouldn't die. Frankly, this is some seriously dark stuff. Now, why is this evidence for Baby being the CEO of Fazbear Entertainment? This scene in Sister Location shows us a character aspect of Baby. She is always a step ahead of everyone else and knows everything that's going on. She knew that Michael's organs would regenerate because, well, her head regenerated. This means that if she knows about Remnant, she has to figure out how to get a bunch of it. This means that the character development of the CEO collecting Remnant completely matches up with Elizabeth's motives. Anyways, I think this is all the tidbits of information I failed to mention in the last video, frankly because it was way too damn long, but now we need to get into something else that I really need to go into before we get two huge things in July: Tiger Rock and Ruin. Yes, we are going to dive into some of the tales from the Pizzaplex stories that give us evidence to suggest Elizabeth is the CEO of Fazbear Entertainment. And trust me, there are a lot. The stories we need to go over are Frailty, Lally's Game, Under Construction, Haps, Help Wanted, Somnophobia, Pressure, Clythophobia, Animatronic Apocalypse, The Bobby Dots Conclusion, and Nexie. Yeah, there are quite a few to go over. However, before I go over the stories just mentioned, first I'll give a brief overview of the stories I won't be covering, those being B7, Submechanophobia, The Bobby Dots Part 1, The Storyteller, GGY, Drowning, and The Mimic, and the epilogues. The reason I don't think that any of these stories have any relevance to the CEO of Fazbear Entertainment is simply because they basically have no connection to the main storyline of this era of FNAF. B7 really is its own one-off story, Submechanophobia isn't really even related to the Pizzaplex, and doesn't seem to connect in any way. I guess you could make a loose connection to the possession of the kid that went missing being evil intention, but that's basically it. The Bobby Dots Part 1 really is a setup for the Bobby Dots conclusion, which I will discuss in a little. The Storyteller and the Mimic are stories that are related to something far different, being the character development of Edwin and the Mimic. GGY connects to Patient 46, and Drowning is to give more insight on Princess Quest more than anything. Anyways, let's go over the stories that I mentioned, but first, I want to make my case for why the glitch trap is, in my opinion, very clearly intentional, and it's coming from Elizabeth herself as the CEO of Fazbear Entertainment. It's important to understand that if glitch trap is intentional, then it sets up a bunch of other things in Tales from the Pizzaplex to be very clearly intentional for Remnant production and freeing William Afton. And if we understand that Elizabeth is the CEO of Fazbear Entertainment, everything in the stories makes a lot more sense. So what information do we have about Glitchtrap that's intentional? Well, we already know how Glitchtrap came to be. He was scanned into FNAF VR game by a bunch of circuit boards, as clearly laid out in tape 5 of Help Wanted. Take a listen to the whole tape.
The drawers have been emptied out. Someone was here. I don't think it was spring cleaning either. No, there was plastic on the floor. Someone was definitely here during the night. Had to have been the client. I mean, they sent us that stuff in the first place with no explanation, told us to scan it, said it would expedite the process so we wouldn't need to program any pathfinding ourselves. It was a budget thing, I guess. It was just junk. Circuit boards and things like that. Looked pretty old. Somehow though, there was usable code on some of it. It seemed to take hold by itself. Things started changing. But then, he started appearing. At least that's what Jeremy said.
So as we are clearly told by Tape Girl herself, she says that someone had left the pile of circuit boards to be scanned and how someone had intentionally wanted those circuit boards to be dropped off to the beta testing area. So there are two possibilities here. Either Glitch Trap was created by a random employee who was completely negligent with circuit boards, which frankly is really stupid, or the circuit boards were dropped off by the CEO to intentionally be scanned into the games. And looking at the character lineup, there is only one character who has any intention of doing that, being Elizabeth Afton. If this is the case, then Elizabeth's plan works out absolutely perfectly. Jeremy ends up coveting his own face-off, leaving Vanessa to take the beta testing role and to receive the Glitch Trap virus, and due to the Glitch Trap virus being connected to a bunch of different databases, this causes many of the things from here on out to go absolutely haywire when something is infected with the Glitch Trap virus. Anyways, back to the stories. Let's go through them one by one and give a brief summary of why they connect back to the CEO of Fazbear Entertainment. In Frailty, we get a clear glimpse of the pendants that are shown throughout the epilogues of Fazbear's Frights. Many people say that this confirms Stitchline games, for frankly, I don't see it. We've seen characters that have been set up in the books before that appear once again in the games, like for example Henry Emily, whose character was set up in the Silver Eyes and later revealed to be the Cassette Man in FNAF 6. This, in my opinion, can very well be the same for Eleanor, who was a character introduced in the books and has a different storyline in a different continuity. We already know that some sort of baby is in the Tank of Fury's Rage, and I do believe this to be the recreation of Eleanor that Elizabeth ends up possessing. This means that Eleanor can very well be in the games, being possessed by Elizabeth. Her body would essentially be reconstructed into a more convincing human to become the CEO. Anyways, we're clearly shown that the pendants are intentionally designed to kill people, as we see what happens at the end of Frailty. Frankly, I don't think that Frailty is the best evidence, considering it's basically the only story that has zero connection to the main story, but it definitely shows that the Eleanor in this continuity is using pendants to murder people, aka the CEO of Fazbear Entertainment. Also, PS, from here on out, Eleanor and Elizabeth will be interchangeable terms, so keep that in mind. Next is Lally's game. While most of the evidence we get from Lally's game is speculation, it seems as though that Lally could very well be possessed by the Glitch Trap virus. While I can't confirm this, Lally used to be an inanimate object that was part of the Pizzaplex. Yes, I am aware that this is called Freddy's Pizzaplex instead of Freddy's Mega Pizzaplex, but from now on, I'm just going to assume that it's the same one. And after it goes on its spree to murder Selena, Cade seems to bring it with him to his new girlfriend's house. Honestly, a lot is left up to interpretation, since we never really know if Cade is intentionally trying to kill these people or not. We also know that Lally's eyes light up at the end of the story, meaning that Lally seems to be possessed in some way. Either way, there are two possible ways this could go. The first is that Lally is possessed by the Glitch Trap virus, and Cade is intentionally misleading women by dating them and then murdering them with Lally, in which after he goes on to the next one. Either Cade is doing this because he's possessed by the Glitch Trap virus, or, in my personal opinion, he's paid off by a certain Fazbear Entertainment employee, aka the CEO. The second is that since we know that this seems to be pretty early in the timeline, due to the Pizzaplex starting out as Freddy's Pizzaplex, it's possible to assume that the CEO of Fazbear Entertainment is not doing anything intentionally evil, but rather Lally is possessed by Elizabeth herself. Frankly though, I think that the first one is really the more likely option, since I personally believe that Elizabeth became the CEO really early, potentially even before the story of Help Wanted. But either way, Lally's game, if Cade is murdering these people intentionally, could be a sign that someone at the top of Fazbear Entertainment is doing these things intentionally, aka the CEO of Fazbear Entertainment being Elizabeth. The next story to go over is Under Construction, as well as quite a few of other stories that are going to fit in the same category. See, a lot of evidence to suggest that the CEO is Elizabeth is because it has to be someone truly evil, someone with an evil intent, and as I have gone over, Elizabeth really is the only one in the series who'd be someone with an evil intention, other than William, who we know is underneath the building, who is definitely not the CEO. So going over Under Construction, while we know that the AR machine is still, quote, technically under construction, it's not under security well enough, and a child is able to sneak into it. Now, as I have gone over in a previous theory, Maya dies in that AR machine, which is why she ends up possessing her reality, where people literally puke out goo babies, and everyone gets cancer like the flu. Now, here's something interesting about this whole story. How the hell does an AR machine kill someone? It's not like the current AR technology is even close to deadly. So is it possible to assume that there was intentional murderous technology in there to have Maya be killed? Yes, I think so. If this was truly so deadly, why wouldn't there be people guarding the machine? We never see the machine again after this incident, and it's explicitly mentioned in the prologue of Clythophobia. So why don't we ever see it again? It's almost like this whole thing was intentionally designed to kill someone for the remnant that someone so desperately needs. This kind of intentionally murderous attraction thing is significant in plenty of other stories, specifically Somnophobia and Clythophobia, as well as Pressure. I understand that the employee that was in charge of the attraction very likely had the glitch trap virus, but there is no way that he, quote, just randomly found a springlock suit in that attraction. It was there for a reason, and it springlocked Luca, a gold mine worth of agony from Luca's springlock failure. Bobby.'s conclusion also gives us a huge revelation on intentional murderous technology as well. Because the Pizzaplex tower that Abe is trying to stay in is so high-tech, you can assume that the only people who have access to production of the rooms are people with really high status in Fazbear Entertainment. By the end of Bobby.'s conclusion, we get confirmation that the room that Abe was trying to stay in was an experiment, and the rogue Bobby.'s were specifically designed to be different. But that's it. We never get any insight on what the experiment was actually for, nor do we have any information on who made the experiment at all. It also seems suspicious that the one room they used for an experiment was the room in which the previous owner, Landon, was killed by the previous Bobby.'s, being the Gen 1s. While there isn't too much to go off of with the room of the experiment, the first question we have to ask is how long has the room been vacant? All we know is that after the Gen 1s killed Landon, the room went abandoned, and later Abe went in because he was so desperate for a room. If the Bobby.'s were installed into each room after the Gen 1s were shut down, it means that someone went into the room to decommission the Gen 1s to install the Bobby.'s, in which they would have gone rogue. This would set the story quite a bit in the future. While it's still iffy on why these Bobby.'s went rogue due to an experiment, it's safe to assume that someone did it intentionally for when someone else would take the room. The status just never changed because Landon was killed there. Either way, it's very possible that the CEO of Fazbear Entertainment intentionally designed a murderous room for anyone who was living there, once again showing that the CEO of Fazbear Entertainment is definitely evil. The last one to go over about murderous technology, intentionally designed by the CEO, is Haps, in which the robot seems to 100% try to kill Aiden and Jace. This one is pretty straightforward. Haps doesn't seem to be possessed by the glitch trap virus in any way, so why is it trying to kill Aiden and Jace? It's pretty clear. He was intentionally designed that way. Again, a crawl space where basically only children are able to fit in is a perfect murder spot, exactly what we see in Haps. Before we go on to one of the biggest stories that could very well suggest a Circus Baby Villainy situation, the last story to go over before that is Nexie. Nexie is frankly a pretty straightforward story. The Nexie Buddytronic that Astrid designs is an absolute wreck due to a malfunction in the production of the robot, and therefore forces her to believe she's ugly and needs to change her appearance. Now the interesting thing is that since the release of that story, I have not seen one thing online talking about why Nexie is actually manipulating Astrid, since most Buddytronics in the story don't actually have that kind of programming wired in. However, the answer is relatively simple. Due to a malfunction in the coding of the Buddytronic machine, it caused a broken version of Astrid's Buddytronic to be possessed by the glitch trap virus. Now, stick with me here, because the evidence actually bumps against a theory that really hasn't been addressed on my channel yet. A recent theory that, in all honesty, was not mine was that the glitch trap virus itself was indeed the program Mimic 1, aka the program that is installed into the storyteller by Mr. Burrows. Now, to me, there's really good evidence to suggest this. As I addressed in my previous video, the Mimic has memory of seeing a hide-and-seek game, and therefore likely has memory of seeing the MCI. As I have addressed, this makes sense, since Dominic and his crew went into Edwin's old factory in 1985. A third crew likely retrieved Mimic, turned his switch off, and brought him to the safe room in the FNAF 1 location where he would have seen the MCI. Since we know that the program Mimic 1 was indeed the program of Edwin's son David, we know that at some point Fazbear Entertainment retrieved Mimic's memory chip. While we don't really have much confirmation on when they retrieved his memory chip, we know that they probably did after Mimic saw the MCI. Anyway, even though that we know that Mr. Burrows was in control of the storyteller and the program he was using, we know that he didn't exactly know the consequences of what Mimic 1 would do to the animatronics, whereas Edwin did. This means that there was someone who held Mr. Burrows' hand during the whole process, aka someone who was of higher command. And keep in mind that Mr. Burrows was literally the head of the designer team's process in the storyteller, so the people who would be of higher command is incredibly limited. This, again, suggests that the glitch trap virus was intentional, because this means that if the discs that were delivered to the Help Wanted testing area were indeed infested with the Mimic 1 program, then it would very well imply that the glitch trap virus was indeed Mimic 1. So the question is, how does this connect back to Nexi? Well, Weir pointed out directly in Nexi that the Baobab tree of the storyteller is directly located in the middle of the atrium, as Astrid and her grandpa were passing through, meaning that the storyteller was still connected to everything when Astrid got her buddy Tronic. If the program of Mimic 1 was indeed the glitch trap virus, it explains why Nexi would be possessed by it after the malfunction of the machine. When the machine malfunctioned, the buddy Tronic inside received the glitch trap virus and ended up being possessed. This leaves one question though. How does this connect to Circus Baby being the CEO? As I pointed out earlier, if the glitch trap virus was intentional, as it seems to clearly have been, then this malfunction of the machine directly points to malicious intent from a higher power, aka pointing back to the CEO being evil. Now there is, finally, one last story that we need to go over before we move on to Ruin, and it's pretty obviously one that connects back to the CEO, Help Wanted. Now why is this story called Help Wanted? Well, it's pretty obvious. We are directly given the story of what actually happens to Steve when he was making the games for Fazbear Entertainment. He has an employer come to his door, tells him to make the games, he refuses, so Fazbear Entertainment forces him to live a life he doesn't want to in order to make him do their bidding. Cool! Now, as I addressed in my previous video, the storyteller seems to be set in 2024 to 2025, depending on whenever the Mimic is actually set. And in the same video, I mentioned a timeline dilemma that I had that frankly was pretty easy to answer. If Help Wanted was in beta, then by the time it comes out, it will be several years after the events of the games. What this shows, however, is that the events of the story Help Wanted had to be in 2023. Now, I know that sounds absolutely crazy, especially considering that the FNAF 6 building was burned in 2023, implying the events of having Steve make the games is a pretty tight window. But here's what I'm thinking. When Fazbear's Frights became open early in 2023, people saw how successful shedding light on the events of the past would be at making money for the company, so Fazbear Entertainment decided to do the same thing with Steve. However, since it backfired, they made Help Wanted, the game, a few years later during the Pizzaplex's early stages of development in the storyteller, so more people would be attracted to the Pizzaplex. This means that Steve making up the games was very likely a couple months after the events of FNAF 6. And frankly, this adds up. It gives Fazbear Entertainment some wiggle room to become the company and try to regain themselves as an LLC. As revealed in the story, we learn that Victoria is not a human, but rather a robot that Fazbear Entertainment is likely using to keep an eye on him as he makes his games. What this shows is two things. First of all, it shows that whoever is now the CEO, they are using malicious tactics in order to do things beneficial for the company, as well as someone who has access to advanced robots that they can use in order to do these things. Now, what are these robots that are being used? Well, it's hard to know completely, but my guess is a really advanced version of a Mimic 2 that they used to mimic a certain woman's behavior, as well as illusion discs. All of this adds up to huge things that are revealed about the highest command in Fazbear Entertainment. The CEO has malicious intent, has access to Mimic 2, access to illusion discs, and knows all the events of the past in FNAF to be able to tell a Fazbear Entertainment employee to explain to Steve what the events of the past were. We have to remember that Steve had to be told the events in order to recreate the games, and there is only one candidate who matches every single mark of what I just mentioned: Elizabeth Afton. An added bonus to this Help Wanted revelation is what Elizabeth says in her monologue right before being killed in FNAF 6. Now we can do what we are created to do and be complete. And as we know, Scrap Baby does indeed come from Circus Baby, and what was Circus Baby intentionally designed to do? Murder people. If this is the case, it gives Elizabeth the motive to use robots in order to murder people, which seems to be exactly what happens in Help Wanted. Anyways, that completes the evidence I have from the Tales from the Pizzaplex stories that imply that Elizabeth Afton is the CEO of Fazbear Entertainment. And now we move on to my favorite part of this video, the future of the games. I have been with FNAF for almost 9 years now. Admittedly, my interest for it was on and off, but for the past 2 years, FNAF has been a huge part of my life, and that will not change anytime soon. So, as a lifelong FNAF fan, it's pretty clear that I really do want the FNAF story to continue, and in really good fashion. I want it to continue in a way that keeps everyone interested in just the story alone. The situation with this, though, is that the FNAF story has really revolved around one thing since the release of Sister Location, and since the release of Sister Location has changed the perspective of how we view the story of the first 4 games as well, and that is the story of one man, William Afton. The story of his beginning, and his end, and his end, and frankly, I have no clue how many times William has come back. But anyway, that has been the true story of FNAF, the story of William Afton. But the doozy is that William Afton is starting to become really annoying. I know he says that he always comes back, but to be honest, how literally are we supposed to take that? Even though I was really happy to see that William Afton came back one final time, I think that he really needs to stop coming back. Scott leaning on William Afton to always come back is starting to become really old, and the Ruin DLC should finally be the end of William Afton. But here's the situation. FNAF is really not the same if there is no Afton. Ending the Afton legacy really makes the FNAF series uninteresting, since it's the Afton legacy that has been since the beginning. When we started the FNAF series off, it was just a haunted pizzeria with missing spirits and the words, "It's me." Now, there are actual main characters. Michael Afton, William Afton, Elizabeth Afton, and heck, with the evidence we see from the games, an artificial Vanessa Afton. Without the Aftons, FNAF is lifeless. FNAF goes back to simply just being a game with haunted animatronics and little character development. But there truly is an opening to keep the Afton legacy alive without William Afton coming back for the zillionth time. Elizabeth Afton taking over William to become the new villain of the series and to carry on the Afton legacy. Vanessa is used to give her a new body, a new era, and of course, to make her father proud. Elizabeth has the motive, the drive to take over Fazbear Entertainment and finish what her father started. To truly be the daughter that would forever enhance what William would have wanted had his ability to live not be taken away. To create enough remnant for herself to which she would never die, and to finally make the dream of having a giant company and being rich and immortality come true. It all comes down to her to make this possible. And with Help Wanted 2 coming out with Sister Location conveniently being the only thing that we see, it seems as though we're going to get an experience of an expanded backstory of Elizabeth Afton. This is not just a theory because I love it. It's a theory because I genuinely believe that it will happen and want everyone to be made aware of, because frankly, if Ruin comes out and everyone is shocked by the ending, then the FNAF community will be scrambling to understand it. But I've laid it out all for you here, and I truly embrace it and expanded on it, a theory that has been creeping its way up to relevance over the past couple of years. But anyways guys, thank you all so much for watching my video. I absolutely love this topic and truly had a blast expanding on the theory, even coming to some conclusions I hadn't realized myself. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and as always, peace out.